Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that I now have a Patreon. You can head on over to patreon.com/Introcaso to check out all the rewards and support Tabletop Babble, World Builder Blog, and all the other projects that I do and the content I put out there in the world for free. For $1, you get a survey each month that helps you determine this content. For $5, you get an extra piece of content each month from me. And for $10, you get to be a part of my live streamed Q&A, ask questions, and I will answer. It is a ton of fun, so you are going to want to go check it out at patreon.com/Introcaso. Thank you so much to everyone who has already donated, and even if you can't donate, I appreciate you spreading the word about the show. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your ears, even if you haven't spread the word. Appreciate all of you so much. If you want to check out more, it's at patreon.com/Introcaso. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am chatting with an incredible game designer, Cypher System expert, Christopher Robin, who also has done stuff with Esper Genesis, with Dungeons & Dragons. He's just incredible. He knows a lot of systems very well. He plays a lot of systems and is just a really good designer and really good person. So here is my interview with him. Okay, everybody, now I am here with one of my favorite people in the role-playing game hobby, or really on the planet, shall we say. Christopher, why don't you tell people who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Sure, my name is Christopher Robin Negelein, and that's what I go by, because Christopher Robin is easy to remember thanks to Winnie the Pooh, and I am named after that character, believe it or not.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
That was my grandmother's wish. So that's why I name dropped that whole long name, because no one's going to remember Negelein.
Right.
Especially when it has more E's than you think it has in there because it's German. And I also go by Ganza Gaming, which is kind of a spinoff of an old podcast that I had. And it's where I do a lot of PDFs for my gaming stuff. So for Christopher Robin Negelein, I'm a teammate for Alligator Alley Entertainment, the guys who do the 5E science fiction game that's called Esper Genesis, which is awesome. If you liked Mass Effect, you like Star Wars, that's right up your alley. For them, I pitch hit for a little bit of their game writing, a little bit of their story writing, a little bit of project management, but I still have to give a shout out to my other favorite RPG friend, Rich Lescofair, who is also a fellow Guild Adept, right?
Yes, yeah, friend of this podcast too. He's great. We love Rich Lescofair.
Yeah, I mean, that baby, it's his. I mean, it's 99% his game design and his world building, and I just feel honored to get to play in that sandbox with my little sandcastles.
Nice. And you also dabble, really more than dabble, you hang out in the Cypher System sandbox as well.
Oh, yeah, that's me, that's kind of like the smaller pond, and I'm the bigger fish on that. And I do a community just like with their DM Guild. There is a community content program for Cypher, and I have done about a third of their catalog.
Wow, that's awesome. What is the name of that marketplace?
That is I think it's the Cypher Community Content Program. You can find it under Monte Cook Games. It doesn't have a separate website like DM Guild does to D&D.
Gotcha.
And just look for Ganza Gaming. And that's where that's where I put all my stuff under.
That's awesome.
They have about 19 PDFs out.
Wow.
So before we go on, do you mind if I tell you how Cypher is connected to Dungeons & Dragons?
Yes. No, please do. That's actually a great thing. So yeah, let's talk about how Cypher and D&D are connected.
All right. So Cypher, that's kind of the generic name for the generic rulebook for that game system. It actually starts with Numenera, which may be a name that people have just recently heard of thanks to the upcoming Kickstarter in March for the Arcana of the Ancients, which is going to put science fantasy into your 5th edition stuff. Monte Cook Games is owned by Monte Cook, Shanna Germain, and they also have additional rule designers Bruce Cordell and Sean Reynolds. And if some of those names sound familiar, they should. Some of those go all the way back to TSR. And then definitely a lot of 3rd edition in-house and third-party products for 3rd edition. And then even, I think Monte Cook and also Bruce were involved in, basically the D&D Next and up until like parts of 5th edition. So there is a lot of the same hands that went into the game you play today that are in Cypher.
Yeah, that is very true that there's a lot of crossover there. And one of the things that I think is fascinating, right, is to see the evolution of things and to see what D&D was like in the 3rd edition days when Monte Cook was really working on tons of source books and things like that for it, and to what the Cypher system has now become. It sort of shows that this whole philosophy of gaming in the 3.0, 3.5 days was like, if you want to be able to do everything, you need a rule for everything, and has now become, if you want to be able to do everything, what you need is a very flexible system that you don't have to write a rule for everything. It just sort of covers a wide array, right? You definitely see that evolution when you look at something like third and 3.5, which has a zillion rules, as opposed to something like the Cypher system, which has rules, but they're flexible and they're easy to modify on the fly and go with, which sort of brings me to what is the Cypher system, right? Talk to me a little bit about the Cypher system itself. How does it work?
So Cypher System for me has been a really great way of a system that lets me play like level 5 to level 20 and get my improv on without thinking about, a gajillion rules, because when you get to level 20, there's still quite a few rules in play. With the Cypher System, you can still be very improv-y and just come up with things thanks to the way it's done, because it's, to me, what I would call an asymmetric game, because the rules for the game master are very more streamlined and stripped down compared to what the players are getting. So how do they accomplish that, right? For the game master, everything breaks down into everything's a challenge, whether it's a monster, whether it's a trap, whether it's an environmental hazard, and that means it has two numbers associated to it. One is a number 1 through 10, and then the other number is the multiple of 3 to that. So basically, 3 and 3 times 3 is 9. And you're like, well, why is that important? Well, generally, what you do with players is that you're only dealing with like numbers 1 through 10, and they manipulate those numbers. And then when you get the final result you want, you multiply it by 3, and that's the number you need to roll on a d20. And on the game master side, that translates into like what you need for the monster. If it's, what's its armor class, what's its hit points. 3 could be its attack roll, but then 9 could be its hit points. And that's it. So for the game master, I mean, you just keep kind of those numbers in line for a default monster, and imagine if you could deal with like a 15th level monster like that.
Wow. Yeah, that would be huge.
15 divided by 5. Yeah, so it's plus 5 to its stats, then it's like 15 for the other things that need, a wider range of numbers to it. And even these rules, I mean, they're not set in stone. So especially for higher level monsters, thing may be a little different. So that's kind of the basis of what the GM has to really worry about. So, but for the players, it's a completely different ballpark. And I think part of it is so that players have lots of things to interact with and enjoy, but, the GM doesn't have to track those as much as you would in the other game. One way they do that is, when monsters attack, the players roll for defense, and then the players roll for attack. So as you see, the game master doesn't do any rolling. It's all player-facing rolls.
Right. Okay.
And some GMs hate that, and some GMs love it. Because you're like, I don't have to stop my flow of concentration to pick up a dice and roll. I just tell the players to roll and then, figure out the numbers. So for the player side, how the game goes is you have 3 attribute pools. It's more of a resource management and endurance sort of philosophy for your game. You want to do something cool, you spend points in your pool to like basically make things easier to do. You want to do something cool with your powers and it costs you points, it comes out of your pools. And then when you get to combat, what you have left in your pools are also your hit points. So then you're balancing out how much you're going to exhaust yourself before you've gotten into combat, or what you have left when you're out of combat. When you run out of these 3 pools, when you run out of one pool, you get a penalty. You run out of a second pool, you get a bigger penalty. And then, when you're on your last pool, you're looking at like, your death. But with 3 attribute pools, it's kind of actually hard to kill somebody off. kind of in the same way with 5th edition. It's, you kind of have to really work to kill somebody off. It can be done, but it's not as straightforward as you think it is in 5th edition. I haven't found it that way, and I'm cool with that. Especially if you like cinematic games, this should not be as much of an issue for you. If you're looking for something to be very, realistic simulation, then yeah, Cypher is not as much for you. But in addition to that, with Cypher, for Cypher, making a character is really easy because you're making a sentence, and then you have kind of a list you can choose from for your sentence. A perfect example would be, I am a blank blank who blanks. Or I am a bold explorer who rides the lightning. I'm not making that up. That is probably a character you can make. So bold is what you call a descriptor. And there's cruel, and there's greedy, and there's fast, and there's mystical, and there's tough. So, and basically how you would explain these in D&D is these would be skill packages you would get, plus a little bonus to your attribute pool. And some of them kind of go a little farther afield than that, but that's kind of where you could put that. And then your type would be your class. For Numenera, which is as a great science fantasy world, you have 3 classes. For their kind of urban fantasy crossover game, The Strange, you have like 3 types. But in Cypher, you have 4 types because it kind of combines everybody together. It's a generic system. But you have like the warrior, you have the adept, which is, surprise, surprise, the wizard, the explorer, which is kind of your jack of all trades. And then you have your speaker, which is basically kind of your bard on steroids. In fact, everything in this game's on steroids. Like I said, it's very cinematic. And then your third thing is called your focus. And your focus is kind of like you cross-class into a theme. You have your type that lets you do your thing, but your theme could be anything from rides the lightning to license to carry. Or is it license to kill? Fights with panache, wields 2 weapons, needs no weapons, things like that. So you cross-class this theme into your type. So you can have very fighty mages, and you can have warriors who can cast spells left, right, and sideways, and they're still not identical.
There's a ton that you can do with this system too, because I've seen all sorts of source books that Monte Cook and other creators have put out, dinosaur source books where you're from the future, but you've traveled back in time and now you're stuck in the past. And so it's like this sci-fi dinosaur hybrid role-playing game, and then games like Gods of the Fall that are a little bit more of your traditional high fantasy, things like Numenera that are a billion years in the future. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do with the Cypher system. What do you think makes the Cypher system great?
Well, in addition to all this kind of crazy flexibility you can get that I've already mentioned, there's also a third thing with the game. They're called ciphers. To get them into D&D parlance, they would be like scrolls and potions. But again, they're on steroids. They do crazy things. And for me, just to let you know as a side note, just like Dungeons & Dragons doesn't always have to have a dungeon or a dragon in it, same thing with ciphers. They can be optional. The philosophy with the game is, especially if you're getting into it, is you build your adventure, your campaign world as you see fit. And with everything everybody can do together with their ciphers and all their equipment, all their types and their foci, they can find solutions. So designing an adventure or designing a game world is very freeing because you can pretty much put anything you want out there. Just like D&D has Ravenloft, which is Gothic horror, and Dark Sun, which is like, Dark Sun's been described all different kinds of ways, right?
Yeah, it's like a post-apocalyptic desert-y.
John Carter of Mars.
Yes.
Yeah. If you can work something in with spell slots and you're happy with it, then you can pretty much use Cypher and their ciphers in the same sort of fashion.
Yeah.
It promotes a cinematic style of play, which opens it up to a lot of different things.
Yeah, it really, really does. It's impressive, all of the sort of different things that can happen with it.
For an example, let me break down those 3 things, those 3 different settings for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do. Please.
Okay, so for ciphers, everybody kind of gets some, and basically, if you work them as the MacGuffin of the story, just like you would work your spell slots as the MacGuffin into your story, you have the same kind of flexibility. So, predation, Basically, your ciphers, actually, it's your grandkids that are like stuck in the past, not you. And they have time rifts, and sometimes time rifts interact with you, and you get weird abilities coded into your DNA, and that's where the ciphers come from. Basically, like imagine if you had a potion of haste, but now the potion of haste is sliced into your DNA until you use it. So it's not even physically around you; it's in you until you pop it off. And then Gods of the Fall actually as Eastern demigods, not just high fantasy, but Eastern style high fantasy where heaven has fallen. There are no gods left, and you're discovering that you're having godlike abilities. And then when you find your potions and your scrolls, the ciphers, and you use them, they dissipate and a little bit of divine essence goes back into the world, which is more of an effect, really. But yeah, it gives you that impression. That's where these ciphers come from, is they are little bits of heaven that have been found. And as you get higher in level, you're literally becoming a demigod, more in the Eastern sense as compared to like, the Western sense where, all gods are somehow all knowing and all open and all that sort of stuff. It's much more, you're playing Hercules. And then for the third one they had is called Unmasked. It was set back in the 1980s. I think they were talking about it before Stranger Things even came out. Basically, as a teenager, these certain psychic items call to you. And as you kind of design them, you turn them into a focus of a mask. And when you put the mask on, you become a different personality with superpowers. Basically, just between the cinematic nature of the game system and using the ciphers as a inspiration to create a MacGuffin in your game, you get really crazy, wild stories. It's awesome.
So I think one of the great things, obviously, we've mentioned is the flexibility, right? And all of the different stories that you can tell. We keep coming back to this idea of like, if you want to tell a cinematic story, Cypher System is a great system to do that. What do you mean when you say that? Like, what do we mean by telling a cinematic story?
Well, I mean, basically, stories that, where you're expecting things to just blossom power level wise. Like I said, to me, Cypher represents between its tiers of 1 to 6, 5th level to 20th level. And you get into it in chunks of 6. It's a game it runs a little more on the abstract side. So it's not so much getting into like simulation and being very specific on things. I've heard some people say negatively for Cypher, well, I can't play a straight up regular sort of spy, not even a spy game, just like, a rough cop on a noir street. And I'm like, most people don't role play that kind of gritty, low power game. It's out there. I agree. But a lot of people, well, they want to play D&D. They want to play with cool spells and powers. They want to play, if they're going to be in the modern day, it's going to be urban fantasy or something where they have access to something that's cool and great. Something you see on TV and on a movie compared to just like very plain Jane. So for me, the whole that it's a flaw is kind of, that's more of a feature, more feature,
Yeah.
less bug. So, I mean, Rides the Lightning is perfect. By the time you're 6th tier, you're teleporting all over the place and you have electric powers and stuff like that. I mean, you can get to that. You can do that in D&D, but it's going to take you longer with a lot more rules.
Yes, definitely. Well, and I do think there's something to be said that the Cypher System's flexibility, it sounds like it's easier to go through systems and that sort of thing. Let's say Esper Genesis, right, is science fiction 5th edition, which I think is great. But I also know that was a monumental effort and it took a lot of time to get it done, right? Would you say going from sci-fi to fantasy takes the same amount of effort in the Cypher System, or do you think it's an easier sort of thing to do?
Perfect example, because another one of the little tweaks with the game is for regular players, there are only 3 types of weapons, or 3 types of weapon damages and 3 types of weapon ranges, and you mix and match the 2. So you have short, medium, long, and you have 2, 4, and 6 points of damage. So basically, for me, we had one game where like only 2 of my players showed up one night, which is not my current crew. My current crew is awesome, and they would rather cut off their limb than miss a session. It's crazy, but and they're playing 5th edition right now. I'm getting to play 5th edition right now. It's great. 2 guys showed up, and we were like, you know what? we're going to switch your crossbows to being rifles and your other weapons into like, knives and pistols. And we played a science fiction game. We just changed nothing on the characters other than their trappings. It was psionics instead of magic, and we were in it. That was it. Done. We moved on. I mean, you could do the same thing in 5th edition, but a lot of people aren't going to make that mental jump as much. And Cypher just makes it easier because it's already kind of baked into the rules that it's very obvious that you're just kind of retweaking things. Not a problem. It was just like, it was just a decision right there, and we moved on and we had fun.
That's awesome. So give me an example of some sort of specific stories that you have told with the Cypher system.
Oh my God.
That what are some of your favorite Cypher gaming moments that you feel are like iconically Cypher? I know this isn't one I hit you with beforehand, so if you need to take a second, that's totally
No, it's all right. It's all right. Well, tell you what, let me just kind of go through what I've done with Cypher, right?
Yeah, let's do it, because you've got some awesome products here.
Oh, thank you. Well, so yeah, the first thing I did was a diesel punk campaign called The Day After Ragnarok. So just for those who know steampunk but don't know diesel punk, as you know, steampunk is kind of Victorian, anachronisms, all that jazz. Diesel punk is World War II anachronisms.
Oh, okay.
I think one of the ones that I always wanted to try and never get around to is called Gear Craig, which was basically instead of tanks, you had tank mech crossover contraptions.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
So The Day After Ragnarok is done by an awesome game designer, Ken Hite. If you haven't like looked into Ken Hite, do.
Oh yes, he's been on the show before too.
Yes.
And yeah, brilliant. Knights Black Agents.
Yes.
Fall of Delta Green. Yeah, he's got a lot of awesome stuff.
So another one to put on your shelf is The Day After Ragnarok. What basically boiled down to was the occultist Nazis were right. I apologize for my historical facts. Was it Little Boy? Who was it? What was the bomb that fell on Hiroshima?
It was Little Boy. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I was right. Little Boy. Great. Little Boy does not go to Hiroshima. Little Boy gets driven right into the eye of the Midgard serpent.
Oh, no.
Yes. Which explodes.
Uh-huh.
Poisons the atmosphere. Uh-huh. Replaces the Iron Curtain with the Serpent Curtain. Turns Cairo into a mystical radioactive wasteland. And reawakens the ice giants.
Wow.
It's called Submachine Guns and Sorcery. Here's a perfect example. Though even in the game book I had, they were kind of like, downplaying people would have access to crazy materials and steampunk, diesel punk stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. My game, that's happening. And I'm sure Ken is like, you're right. That's your game. Let it go. And ran Cypher with that, like practically effortlessly. And had a blast with that. Basically, the Texas Rangers are again in their glory days, thanks to patrolling Texas from all the types of, Cthulhu / Serpentine / Norse dangers that are running around in America now. And that's what it was. It was every day the Texas Rangers would come in, get their briefing for whatever craziness was happening, and they would go out and they would get it done. In fact, I will, if you want, I'll point you to where I actually have done a little podcast on YouTube. I did a YouTube series on part of that adventure.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yes, it was crazy. I loved it. And then after that, we did Gods of the Fall, which I said is basically demigods, and had a great time with that. Instead of ciphers being all variety of different things, from like things you are not meant to know to being R&D from the lab, experimental weapons, there were bits of heaven. And in that one, around about mid-level, because of demigod bonuses and everything else, my war gods were literally splitting T-Rexes in half. They were gone, and then probably the one that really took off and started my current gaming group is I called it Solar Sails. For your old timers in D&D, it was homage to Spelljammer.
Whoa, nice.
So I kind of melded it with that old Dragon magazine, or was it Polyhedron? The one where they redid Spelljammer for 3.0 for one like issue. Was it In the Shadow of the Spider Moon or something like that, if I remember right? It's been a while. So it was like one system. Basically, nobody knew why, but it was a big mystery. But the planet blew up, but chunks of it were still around and breathable, and those were called bastions. And I kind of tweaked the Spelljammer towards swashbuckling, because one of my theories about Spelljammer is it was trying to be swashbuckling and being master and commander, and you really can't do both.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do one or the other.
Oh, okay. Why do you say that?
Well, a perfect example is like people will be like, well, why doesn't everybody just drop rocks on top of castles from Spelljammers?
Uh-huh.
That's it, master and commander mode. Let me see what I can find out to get the tactical strategical advantage. And swashbuckling, is, you don't even think of things like that. You're more interested in trying to put on a good show. So for like the bastions, I basically said each one was in a bubble of like the bubble of air had a layer of hurricane winds. So you could only go in and out one way. And there was also a ceiling on each bastion. So there we go. No dropping rocks on people. Well, you could on people, but not on castles.
Got it.
See how when I'm talking about that twist? Yeah. So that one lasted a good while. We went through all 6 tiers. They finally met up with the Imperial Hobgoblin Space Navy and took them on with their the Unified Free People Fleet and all that jazz. It was great. Lots of memories. In fact, we're still making in-jokes about it today. Actually, what's funny is, now that I'm remembering it, their favorite NPC was a goblin cabin boy whose name was Elliot's,
okay.
whose signature line was, what? Because they were doing such crazy things. That was his answer to everything. And now in our 5th edition game, Chris, you get to play. And I'm like, oh, what do I want to play? And I didn't even get it out of my mouth. They're like, Elliot's, you have to play Elliot's the Goblin. He has to be in our team. And then another good example for a D&D guys, my game master was like, well, I didn't want to really do goblins. I looked at Xanathar's guide. I don't really like them. And I said, I'll make it easy for you. I'm a goblin, in quotation marks, mechanically a halfling. How does that sound? He was like, oh, okay, sold. So now I have a goblin who's technically a lightfoot halfling, and we're happy. We're fine. We didn't need to have a specific goblin mechanical type to get things done. And we're having a blast.
Nice.
So, yeah. In fact, if you on the Facebook for D&D where someone says, my goblin killed a dragon with a little help from his friends, that was my post. So we played Solar Sails. And then after Solar Sails, what did we do? I'm trying to remember. Because at this point, I actually got my own players to start running their own games. So I could play. And one of my players, she ran us through her own high fantasy sort of Final Fantasy mashup.
Right.
And then I had another player. He really just took to tweaking the Cypher rules and stripping a lot of things out to make a very dark, gritty horror game.
Okay.
And I loved all his gaming rule ideas. I just thought all of them together were a bit much.
Okay.
But it was like, yeah, he had gone to the Louvre for his honeymoon, and he just took a map of the Louvre, and then suddenly we were like in Silent Hill, the Louvre.
Oh, wow.
So and I say Silent Hill with quotation marks on it, but that was it. We kind of went to the dark dimension of the Louvre, and most of us got out physically. Some of us spiritually, some of us never left.
Some never left, yeah. Oh,
and then after that, it's for us, it was a big move. We decided to do 5th edition. Oh, yeah, then after that, just to catch you up, I ran a 5th edition Esper Genesis game. Loved it. Even had a partial total party kill. And partial total, really? Yeah, partial party kill, and everybody loved
TPK.
it. Yeah.
A PTPK.
Yeah, there you go. Small digression. We had a stowaway artificial intelligence on board our ship that was in hyperspace, and it was like, well, do we delete it or do we like let it escape? Because it was wanting to like start a counter revolution. It was. I don't want to get into it complicated, but anyway, the stakes were kill it or let it escape. And even though the characters were getting in heated debate, the players were checking themselves. They're like, this is my character, right? I'm not really like this, I'm not really this attached to what's going on, right? And everybody's like, yeah. Because, 9 times out of 10, when you're at a usual table and somebody goes, I'm going to hurt him, it's not, it's very personal. It's not character to character. It's player to character. It's player to player practically.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah. So at some point, guns were drawn, powers were summoned, and the Catman hunter basically said, "I have 4 grenades and 4 furry fingers." Ka-ching! Pulled all the pins, blew out half the cargo bay while they were in hyperspace. And then after that, there was a moment of silence, and everybody was like, "What? That was so cool!" Made up new characters, and the new characters had the opposite opinions of their old characters, so everybody was on the same page of letting the AI go home. Never had that happen in a fantasy game, ever.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's what I liked about, just a small digression, playing Esper Genesis, because it's like a whole extra tool set and just frees a lot of people from, like, we do what we do in fantasy. This, like, it just lets them do crazy things.
Don't go anywhere. There's more Tabletop Babble coming up.
I'm Lisa Chen, and I host Behold Her, a monthly podcast that shines a spotlight on women in the world of tabletop games. There are so many women to behold in this amazing hobby, and our experiences as female gamers are as diverse as we are as individuals. Through one-on-one interviews, audio essays, and panel discussions, all centered around a monthly theme, the guests on Behold Her share their unique stories as players, game masters, designers, artists, organizers, and so much more. Their words are inspiring, uplifting, and informative. Check out Behold Her Podcast wherever podcasts are found, or visit beholdherpodcast.com.
All right, back to the show.
So speaking of Cypher, you said you've got a third of the products on this marketplace. Let's talk a little bit about those products. Like what have you made? Let's we don't need to necessarily run through the whole list, but let's call out some of your favorites.
Sure. Well, I'm going to call it my favorites because they're my customers' favorites, and actually, it's funny enough.
Always a good plan,
right? And if you look at my covers, you can see my evolution as a layout artist.
Yes, yeah, and that's, one of the things that I think people should understand is, you mentioned this earlier when we talked about what you do for Alligator Alley. You do it all, right? You can do layout, you can do management.
Oh, well, I'll back up. I'll back up on the layout. Because we have decided Brian is the layout artist for Esper Genesis. I'm flattered, but yeah, I'm gonna stop. Put that line right there. I don't do the layout for Esper Genesis. Project management, some other things, yeah, but because Brian, he does really great work.
Yeah, those books are beautiful, but you have a lot of really great products here too that are well laid out.
Thank you. Yes, and that is 100% me on the Cypher side.
Nice. Yeah, I love the look of Mortal Fantasy. But anyway, you go ahead and tell me what are some of your favorites and some of your fans' favorites.
Okay, so everybody likes the crews. Basically, as we described earlier, we talked about descriptors, which kind of add a skill package to you and also like kind of an attitude for your character. Crews does that for the entire group. So like if you're musicians or you're all cops or you're all vampires, instead of trying to decide which one of your 3 things you're going to tweak to get that vampire theme or that cultural theme going, you pick a crew and everybody gets a blanket bonus. And then twice per session, there is like a kind of a group little special effect you guys can do. Like if you're all part of a ship, then twice per session, you might find what you need if it's a mundane item somewhere in a smuggler's cubby that you forgot. Like your entire ship is a closet. But yeah, or a musician, everybody gets some sort of bonuses for like being able to perform, and then you don't have to so then your 3 main abilities, your descriptor, your type, and your foci, you can still do whatever you want. You aren't then having to commit. You don't have to commit to the group's theme and still be connected to the group. So that's a favorite. And then, of course, you just mentioned it, Mortal Fantasy. And Mortal Fantasy was an ambitious project because it's like a double bridge project. First off, there was a little sidebar in Gods of the Fall that said, hey, you know what? Even if you don't want to do demigods, you can play regular fantasy in this game and make regular characters. And that was whoever wrote that sidebar. It's the Mortal Fantasy is your fault. Just own up to it. It lets you kind of tweak Gods of the Fall setting. If you want to play straight up fantasy, where do the dwarves and elves go? Well, now I give you ideas for where dwarves and elves go. In addition to that, I also do about 5 or 6 types that just let you do D&D archetypes in the Cypher system, like Barbarian and Paladin and Bard and Druid. Mostly by giving each type their own little special ability that would be familiar to somebody who played D&D when you think of a Druid. And then everything else kind of gets you back into like the other stuff with Cypher. So then it's a bridge between playing fantasy in Gods of the Fall, and also for GMs who know their players are going to have trouble getting their head wrapped around, you can do anything. I don't know what to do. Well, here you go. Here is your Ranger type. Oh, I can play my Ranger now. I'm good. And then you can play your Cypher game, and they're halfway there meeting you because at least they're playing their Ranger and they feel comfortable. Because one of my philosophies is, as game designers and game masters, this hobby is, it's an endeavor. We are like foodies. We're gourmets, But for a lot of players, in a respectful way, I'm saying this, our D&D is, and just not D&D, but role playing in general, is a comfort food. They come in, they do their thing that they know to do and they're comfortable with, and they hang out with their friends. So sometimes we have to kind of find ways to meet people in the middle. So the game master doesn't feel like they're doing the same thing over and over, because when you're being very creative, but you're doing the same thing over and over, or same but different, it kind of gets old after a while.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I've felt that as a GM, right? I've felt the like, this was cool the first time I did it, and now I am doing it for the 12th time, and my players are no longer impressed. And your players will even sometimes in jokes call those things out. I think they'll say like, "Oh, here we go again!" Like it's another classic villain's the bad guy's the villain, or that kind of thing. If that was one.
Oh, the guy who helped us out way in the beginning of first level, he's the actual evil sorcerer.
Exactly.
So the other two, I mean, I've done quite a few little adventures. I have like several monster books I put out. Everything I've done has been about anywhere between 8 to 12 pages. So they're all small, they're all cheap. And Mortal Fantasy is like the 40 page. It's the big one. It's the 40 pager. So the other ones that I enjoyed are I have 2 sci-fi things I put together. The sci-fi setting I thought of and I enjoy, but it's not catching on, a little bit to my disappointment, because the setup is basically humans are that slightly embarrassing uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. They're a little boorish. They're a little loud. But if you went overseas and vanished, they'd be the first one to take a plane ticket over there to find you. And God help anybody that gets between them and finding you to get you home. So, humans come, they're basically on the range of gravity that you've got. Humans come from the highest G planet, Earth. So, I mean, if we aren't careful, we'll accidentally break somebody's arm on an ambassadorial mission.
Right.
So we're heavy, we're short, we're kind of like Supermen. Another thing I threw in to come up with the ciphers is that our big dark secret is we don't know how our technology works, because it's alien technology that we're just basically kind of riding the wave on. So when Scotty doesn't know, basically, when you see Scotty's just plugging things in back and forth, he's exactly doing that because he has no idea exactly what he's doing. He's just hoping he can get these 2 pieces of alien artifact to fix the problem. And then suddenly we have time travel. It explains Star Trek perfectly. How'd you do time travel? Well, I don't know. Instead of like giving out technobabble, it's like, what we got. That's what happened. I don't know. I don't know if I want to do it again. So, basically it creates, this kind of like slightly tongue-in-cheek space opera world where humans are, everyone else is a little more, refined, and humans, or at least the humans we send out into space, are all the wild cards. I have 2 of those, one for characters, one for gear. And then my challenge for characters is I wanted to maybe do alien types, but now I worked myself into the whole idea that Earth is high G, but how do you do a warrior race when it's not an Earth person, right? So that inspired me to basically make my generic aliens to be all uplift critters from Earth. So they'd all share that kind of that high G issue. So wolves were my warrior races. Uplifted octopi were my psionic race. Use them as is, or just scrape off the octopi, get some calamari going, and use that. Use that as your, psionic Vulcan race if you want. And then I did gear, and of course the sci-fi gear is much more popular because everybody's like, more toys. They love the toys, especially when you're with the Cypher system. And then I have 2 or 3 different fantasy islands I put together that GMs can just kind of drop into their campaign world. And I would like to think that like a good third of that, or a good chunk of that, can be used as inspiration, even if you aren't going to use the Cypher system. One was very Greek. One was a very bamboo punk, so very Asian inspired. And yeah, Google it, guys. I mean, break out of your shell if you want. I mean, just the things that Eastern countries have come up with in the past, for inspiration for advanced technology in your fantasy games. Awesome. Like they had earthquake detectors.
Wow.
Long before anyone else. Yeah, it was set up like a dragon had a ball, and then if an earthquake happened, the ball would drop out of the dragon's mouth and into the waiting little frog statue, and that told you what direction the earthquake had come from.
Holy moly.
Not making this up.
That's really fun. That's awesome.
that's an invention I name drop in my little venture there. And then the other one was basically a whole undead island where it is a political and physical war between a group of liches and several towns of vampires and a whole Romanesque nation of intelligent ghouls.
Nice.
So, yeah. And also, I almost forgot my hobgoblins, which were basically...
Can't forget your hobgoblins.
They were basically Viking hobgoblins.
Go on.
Just detailing how they lived their life and how they moved from island to island and how they go south. But, you think it's random raids. It's not as random as you think it is, because they're kind of using the humans and their resources like we would use wheat, a plot of land. Don't attack these guys. We attacked them last year. We need them to grow bigger and better again so we can attack them again. And then I even gave an optional origin story for them that links them right back to that Solar Sails campaign, where they're basically stranded hobgoblin imperial dudes.
Wow.
Or their great-great-great-great-grandparents were.
Wow.
Okay, so I might have a little imagination. I don't know. What you tell me, James. Do I have a little bit of imagination?
You have miles and miles and miles of imagination, which is great. People should definitely go check out your work. But you said you wanted to mention something about Patreon as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a Patreon. Surprise, surprise. Shocker. And in my Patreon, kind of the default, or a little bit of the when things are slower. I do a blog a little about, being in the RPG industry and the life of that and the life of being a freelancer. Get to dabble in fiction a little bit. Oh, small side note. I have been told here I will get a shelf date for an upcoming anthology where I have a short story in it.
Oh, fun.
Horror high fantasy, or you and I would call it Ravenloft. I promise when you read my short story, you won't look at dwarves the same way again.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But the big overarching thing for the Patreon is I have like 3 main projects I'm like working on and tweaking on. I'm waiting on feedback from, you sign up, you tell me what you like and what you don't like. I'll change things a little bit. Maybe one will go a little lower on the priority list. Maybe something else will poke up. So for your D&D guys, I'll start off with Silver and Steel. And my spin with Silver and Steel, it's 5e with like some old school stuff thrown in. But the goal is you can still, when you're done with your character, you can still go to someone else's game and still play with your character. So it's not so stripped or so weird that you're like, what is this? No, I mean, you might see things are labeled a little differently, but yeah, the Silver and Steel character should be completely compatible with a regular 5e game. But the focus on it is basically making it very easy to start and play, so it's very beginner friendly. Don't get me wrong, the Minds of Phandelver is awesome, but you still need pre-gens to kind of get that off the ground as fast as possible. And my goal is to you roll dice, pick a character, fill in your sheet, and you go, just like you did back in the old days. And the setup is basically a silver dragon had visions of a coming apocalypse, got some people to go with her. They went into a mountain range for 200 years, closing the gates as they saw something rumbling towards them that was reshaping the landscape as it came towards them. And now it's 200 years later. The silver dragon is completely tired and she needs to regenerate or something. She just can't. Her magic plus everyone else's magic and cooperation just can't keep it going. We got to open it up, and the world is anew. And people can basically, your groups are going out to discover how things have changed, what's going on, who has survived. Maybe find other places where people hold up in the ground, dungeons, and it's a little bit basic D&D, 5th edition engine meets Earth Dawn for those who go way back. Yeah, all kind of together.
Nice.
And then, kind of discover the game world as you kind of read through the rule book. So that was Silver and Steel.
Mm-hmm.
Triton's Call, I kind of see it as more of a modern day game, but some people have asked me to kind of tweak it for fantasy as well. Basically, it's a toolkit. The setup is you discover you have the bloodline of Atlantis, and that your distant cousins you've rediscovered are invading your homeland.
Okay.
What do? So here's the toolkit approach. What is your bloodline? Is it super science? Is it magical? Is it bio horror? What's your bloodline do? How does it give you cool things? Is there a conspiracy of Atlanteans already working through things? Obviously, you discovered them. It wasn't on the beach. How did this happen? What kind of conspiracy are they running where, you've been accidentally left here to the edge and then rediscovered again? And what's their invasion? Is it a psychic invasion? Is it a, conventional military invasion? Is it, something, again, conspiratorial? So you can take the same concept and run it 3 to 4 different times out of the same book, and you get 3 to 4 different style campaigns.
Got it. Wow.
You might be familiar. You actually mentioned a book earlier in the podcast that has a very similar vibe to it. Night's Black Agents.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Indeed.
So, and my hat off to Ken, and he will definitely get a big fat credit in the book as the inspiration for it, if it comes to fruition. So the third project is called Reaches. I'm thinking calling it Shattered Reaches. And as we had mentioned before, right, the GM's getting bored, but the players want the same thing over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm paraphrasing with respect. So with the Shattered Reaches, basically the players are getting to discover a new territory with weird challenges and hazards and new types of missions to do. And they're still playing their elf, and they're still playing their ranger and their halfling, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Underneath that territory and the challenges all set it up where you're basically getting to run a weird Western.
Okay.
So, I mean, a perfect example is, you have Magic Missile, right? It's a wand.
Yep.
What if you turn that wand into a crystal?
Okay.
And then you could put that crystal in a more of a kit bash sort of wand, so you could aim it at people.
Okay.
Now you've got a pistol.
Oh. I see what you did there. It's very clever.
Well, I've also been playing around with the idea of having repeating crossbows because repeating crossbows are cool. But when we really started to click with the wands. So, yeah. So everything is set, and, perfect idea. The crystals basically become why people want to come out here for a gold rush,
mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. And then just doing some research will make some interesting things as well. So that's why, like I said, the GM gets to kind of enjoy doing kind of a Western. And I call it a weird Western because it's not going to be a 1-for-1 for a Western. And the players still get to do their things, and everything's fine. And that's, it's not even going to, if I do this right, it can be for 5e, it could be for OSR, it could be for anyone who just throws elves and dungeons into their happy gaming life.
Right. Right. Yeah, I love it. I will be checking that out for sure. For sure. So let me ask you a question then. If people want to learn more about the Cypher system first, where do you recommend they get started? Where should they go?
The Monte Cook Games website.
Mm-hmm.
Also on Geek and Sundry, I think they just started up a series of videos from the streaming game, the Callisto 6, where they explain the basics of Cypher again. And then also, you can also go to the Cypher Unlimited Discord, which has 1,800 members in it.
Wow. That's
and
huge.
Those guys, yeah, it's huge. And those guys are it's like the nicest, cuddliest, softest place you will ever be on the internet. Everybody, we literally get up and say good morning to each other. That's, it's like a little family, even though it's 1,800 people. And they're more than happy to help out and guide you. And, they're great people. My hat's off to Spigs and Ancient Albatross. They're great guys, great moderators, owners of the Discord, actually. And the mods are all great people, too. So it's very welcoming. Go on in.
Nice. Yes. Go check it out. And what if people want to find you, Christopher? Where should they go? What should they do?
Well, for Discord, again, Cypher Unlimited, also the Esper Genesis 5 ERPG official Discord. You can also find me on thebrightcave.com as my blog, but my blog's a little old. If you want to keep up to date, I would definitely do my Patreon, which is, patreon.com/Ganza Gaming. And, and sometimes I'm on Twitter, and at Twitter, it's at Chris R. Negelein. And see, this is why I go with Christopher Robin. Because it's Negelein.
Excellent. That's great. And we will link that over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com for people too. So in case you're in your car listening or something like that and don't have time to write down the spelling of Chris's last name. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm flattered, and I've had a great time.
Wow, that was a great interview with Christopher. What a really good, knowledgeable dude. Just really incredible. We will definitely have him back. People, you can help Tabletop Babble grow by heading on over to patreon.com/Introcaso. That's INTROCASO. I have a Patreon there where you can help decide topics for upcoming episodes of the podcast and also upcoming blog articles. You can get extra content, things like that. Go check it out at patreon.com/Introcaso. You can also help Tabletop Babble grow by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. It costs you nothing, and it helps the show so much. And if you leave us a 5-star review, I will read your review out loud and credit the person who left it. You can make me say anything you want, like Sam Dickerson, who left a review entitled "One of My Favorite Podcasts." And the review reads, "Now I'd like to review one of my favorite podcasts on the planet. Tabletop Babble is a consistent source of great advice and discussion on a wide range of RPG topics. James and his guests present a plethora of perspectives on many different systems and game types. The overarching focus is D&D, but there is something for everyone here. James makes a conscious effort to prominently feature diverse voices within the RPG community and openly discusses topics that include gender, race, and LGBTQ+. Add this podcast to your rotation today." Well, Sam Dickerson, thank you so much for this review. This was really awesome to hear that Tabletop Babble is one of your favorite podcasts. Really means a ton to me. That is just so huge. So thank you so much. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso. Also, check out my blog, which is all about game design, and it's got GM advice, player advice. That's right, advice for you players, too. It's over at worldbuilderblog.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex. Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a minute to let you know that this podcast was brought to you by Genuine Fantasy Press. Genuine Fantasy Press is giving away a free version of their new book, The Compendium of Forgotten Secrets: Awakening. It's over at genuinefantasypress.com, and we talked with the creator, William King, on Tabletop Babble. He is just an incredible individual who has made a ton of Warlock packs and other subclasses for free over at genuinefantasypress.com. It's 34 new subclasses in all, with over 175 new spells and invocations, 10 races. This is 190 pages of new content for free. For free. If you want to get the full version, it also includes a lot of awesome stuff for GMs, including campaign hooks. It's got beautiful full color artwork and is available internationally in hardcover on Amazon. Go check this out and check out our interview with William King, who just really knows what he is talking about. There's also going to be another episode with him coming up soon. It's the Compendium of Forgotten Secrets: Awakening over at genuinefantasypress.com. Genuine Fantasy Press, inspiring adventure. I also wanted to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Kobold Press. Kobold Press, the makers of fine 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons third-party products like the Empire of Ghouls. It's the first 5th edition campaign from Kobold Press for characters levels 1 through 14, taking your heroes deep into the realms of the undead. Explore a kingdom of terror and blood ruled by vampires, and far below the earth in the Underdark, a mighty empire of ghouls. This massive 5th edition campaign will include new Underdark lore, as well as tons of undead, monsters, magic, and more, with both an adventure book and a player guide. You are definitely going to want to check this out. It is going to be Kickstarted, so sign up for alerts when the Kickstarter goes live at koboldpress.com/Kickstarters. That's koboldpress.com/Kickstarters for the Empire of Ghouls, a campaign for 5th edition with guides for both GMs and players. Check it out.